Welcome back to Teach Me the Bible Stories with Miss Michelle. Today we will look at Ezra 1 through 6 and Esther 1 and 2, where Cyrus issues a decree for the Jews to return home, and God puts Esther in just the right place. There will be 10 questions at the end. You can earn 100 points. But first, the books of the Bible. Let's do the books of 12 minor prophets and review the last half, remembering why we are doing each one of those signs. So there are 12 books of minor prophets: Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Now for Nahum, we're using the ASL sign for punish, because Nahum prophesied that God would punish the evil nations, specifically the Assyrians whose capital was in Nineveh. For Habakkuk, we're using the ASL sign for amaze, because God told the prophet Habakkuk, look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For Zephaniah, we are using the ASL word for purify, because Zephaniah announced that God will judge Israel for the purpose of purifying Israel. For Haggai, we're using the ASL sign for choices, because Haggai told the Jews who returned to Jerusalem to think carefully about their choices. For Zechariah, we're using the ASL word for return, because Zechariah declared God's message, saying, return to me, declares the Lord Almighty, and I will return to you. For Malachi, we're using the ASL word for future, because Malachi tells of a future messenger who will come and restore God's people and heal their hard hearts. So there are 12 books of minor prophets: Hosea, cheat; Joel, call; Amos, seek; Obadiah, consequence; Jonah, big fish; Micah, justice; Nahum, punish; Habakkuk, amaze; Zephaniah, purify; Haggai, choices; Zechariah, return; Malachi, future. Okay, are you ready for today's Bible story? Listen carefully. This story is from the Bible, God's holy word. The Medes and the Persians conquered the Babylonian Empire, and King Cyrus became the king of Persia. The Lord moved in King Cyrus's mind and heart so that he wanted to build a new temple in Jerusalem. Now keep in mind, Cyrus is not an Israelite. He's not a Jew. He is the king of Persia. And God gave Cyrus the desire to show favor to the Jews. King Cyrus sent Zerubbabel to Jerusalem to be the leader of this rebuild. Cyrus declared that Jews who wanted to return could. He also sent resources with them. This fulfilled Jeremiah's prophecy that the exiles would one day return to Jerusalem. But it fulfilled another prophecy as well. 150 years before Cyrus issued this decree, the prophet Isaiah prophesied that Cyrus will order for Jerusalem to be rebuilt and the temple foundation to be laid. Isaiah gave that prophecy about Cyrus before Cyrus was even born. Isn't that amazing? Isn't our God amazing? Okay, so whose mind and heart did the Lord move in so that he wanted to build a new temple in Jerusalem? King Cyrus. And God gave King Cyrus the desire to show favor to which group of people? The Jews. And Jeremiah had prophesied that the Jewish exiles would one day return where? To Jerusalem. And who did Isaiah mention by name before this king was even born? Cyrus. Isaiah prophesied that Cyrus would give an order for Jerusalem and what else to be rebuilt? The temple. And Zerubbabel led 42,000 Jews to return to Jerusalem from exile. They first built an altar to the Lord God, and began morning and evening burnt offerings. After building the altar to the Lord, they began constructing the temple foundation. Now, there were some people who lived in Jerusalem before the exiles arrived, and some of those people offered to help rebuild the temple. But Zerubbabel and other Jewish leaders did not trust them and told them that they weren't allowed to help. And they were right not to trust them, because right after that, those same people tried to stop the building of the temple. When a new king came to power and replaced Cyrus, these people wrote to this new king, and they told King Artaxerxes that the Jews who had returned from exile were trying to rebel against the king. They told him that if they finished building Jerusalem and its walls, that they would not pay taxes to him. They were lying. Well, after King Artaxerxes read that letter, he ordered the Jews to stop rebuilding. Okay, so who led 42,000 Jews to return to Jerusalem from exile? It's a hard name. Zerubbabel. And what was the first thing they built so that they could make morning and evening burnt offerings? An altar to the Lord. And some of the people who had lived in Jerusalem before the exiles returned offered to help rebuild the temple. Did Zerubbabel and the other Jewish leaders let them? No, they didn't trust them. And what did those people do that showed Zerubbabel was right to not trust them? What did they try to stop? They tried to stop the rebuilding of the temple. Well, those same people who wrote to King Artaxerxes and said that the Jews were trying to do what? Trying to rebel against the king. Well, after King Artaxerxes read that letter, he ordered for the Jews to do what? To stop rebuilding. Well, after many years of no work being done on the temple, the prophets Haggai and Zechariah told Zerubbabel that God wanted them to start rebuilding the temple again. Zerubbabel listened, and he went back to work. Well, government leaders then asked, "Who authorized you to rebuild the temple?" And they wanted to know the names of those working so they could turn them in. But God was making the way possible. A letter was sent to King Darius, the new king, asking him to search for King Cyrus's decree. But the evil plan of these people backfired, because when King Darius found the decree, he wrote back saying, "Do not interfere with the work of the temple of God." And in addition, King Darius ordered for money to be taken out of his own treasury, out of his own royal treasury, and be given to Jews to assist them with rebuilding the temple. Several years later, the temple was completed. God made the way possible. Okay, what did Zerubbabel do when the prophets Haggai and Zechariah told him that God wanted them to start rebuilding the temple again? He listened and went back to work. Well, the government leaders tried to stop the work and sent a letter to whom? To King Darius. And when King Darius found Cyrus's decree, he ordered for the government leaders to not do what? To not interfere with the work on the temple. And where did Darius order for money to be taken out of so that it could be given to the Jews to assist them in rebuilding the temple? King Darius's own royal treasury. And what was completed several years later? The temple. Okay, let's go back to Persia. Not all the Jews returned to Jerusalem when Cyrus gave that original decree. Only 42,000 returned. Thousands and thousands of Jews stayed in Persia. Mordecai was one Jewish man who stayed in Persia. Mordecai was originally taken from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar and was forced to live in exile in Babylon. Mordecai had a much younger cousin by the name of Hadassah. Hadassah's parents died, so Mordecai raised Hadassah like she was his own daughter. Hadassah was her Hebrew name. In Persia, she was known as Esther. Yes, this is the same Esther from the book of the Bible, Esther. Esther was beautiful. She was lovely in form and in features. Not all the Jews returned to Jerusalem. There were still thousands and thousands of Jews. Where? In Persia. And why did Mordecai raise his much younger cousin Hadassah like she was his own daughter? Because her parents had died. Hadassah was her Hebrew name. What name did Hadassah go by in Persia? Esther. And describe Esther's appearance. She was beautiful, lovely in form and features. Well, King Ahasuerus, that's a hard one to say, King Ahasuerus was the king of the massive Persian Empire. He ruled his empire from his palace in Susa. In his 3rd year, he held a banquet for all his nobles and officials that lasted 7 days. That's a long banquet, 7 days. Well, Queen Vashti also gave her own banquet for the women. But on the 7th day of the king's banquet, King Ahasuerus ordered for Queen Vashti to come and display her beauty. He wanted everyone there to be able to look at Queen Vashti and see how beautiful she was. But Queen Vashti refused to come. Her refusal to come made the king furious. He was so angry. King Ahasuerus asked his nobles what should be done to Queen Vashti since she disobeyed the king's command. The nobles advised the king to order a decree that Queen Vashti not be allowed to enter the king's presence again, and her royal position of queen being taken away from her and given to another woman. Well, the king followed their advice. Okay, King Ahasuerus was king of what massive empire? The Persian Empire. And where was his palace? In Susa. King Ahasuerus held a banquet for all his nobles and officials. How many days did King Ahasuerus' banquet last? 7 days. And on the 7th day of the banquet, the king ordered for Queen Vashti to come. Why did he want her to come? So everyone could see how beautiful she was. And how did Queen Vashti respond to the king's order? She refused to come. Queen Vashti's punishment was that she was never allowed to come into the king's presence again. What was the other part of her punishment? Her royal position of queen was given to another woman. Well, a search began for beautiful young women that could possibly become the new queen. The search went out throughout the entire Persian Empire. All the exceptionally beautiful young women were brought to the king's palace to be under the care of the king's eunuch. Of course, when Esther was spotted, she was brought to the king's palace. All the young, beautiful women, including Esther, received beauty treatments for 1 year. The king's eunuch was especially pleased with Esther, so he gave her 7 maids to attend to her beauty treatments. Esther never revealed that she was a Jew because Mordecai forbid her, telling her not to tell anyone. Well, every day, Mordecai walked back and forth near the palace courtyard to find out how Esther was doing and what was happening with her. Well, after the year of beauty treatments, each woman in the king's harem was brought to the king one at a time. When Esther came before the king, Esther stood out from all the rest. The king Ahasuerus was more attracted to Esther than any of the other women. She won his favor, so he put the royal crown on Esther's head, and Esther became queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet for all his nobles and officials in honor of Queen Esther. Okay, a search was made that went throughout the Persian Empire. What were they searching for? all the young, beautiful women who could possibly be the new queen. And why didn't Esther reveal that she was a Jew? Because Mordecai forbid her. He told her not to tell anyone. Who walked back and forth near the palace courtyard in order to find out about Esther? Mordecai. And of all the women who came before the king, who was the king most attracted to? Esther. And what royal position did Esther receive? Queen. Well, in our next lesson, we will see that God placed Esther in this important position because he had a great purpose for her. I look forward to finishing that story. But in our lesson today, we see how God moved in the heart of King Cyrus to rebuild the temple and to show favor to the Jews. We also saw how God worked in the heart of King Darius, where he took money out of his own royal treasury to help complete the temple. And we know God worked in the heart of King Ahasuerus to show favor to Esther. People have the freedom to choose, but it is obvious God is able to accomplish exactly what he wants to be accomplished. And that gives me great peace, knowing that God is the one in charge and that he can accomplish his plans and purposes, even when sin and evil abound. We will see more of that in our next lesson. Okay, are you ready for your 10 questions? Just hit the pause button if you need a little bit more time after each question. Question 1. Whose mind and heart did the Lord move in so that he wanted to build a new temple in Jerusalem? Time, King Cyrus. Question 2. Who did Isaiah mention by name before this king was even born? Time, Cyrus. Question 3. Zerubbabel led 42,000 Jews to return to Jerusalem from exile. What was the first thing they built so that they could make morning and evening burnt offerings? Time, an altar to the Lord. Question 4. When King Darius found Cyrus's decree, he ordered for the government leaders to not do what? Time, to not interfere with the work on the temple. Question 5. Where did Darius order for money to be taken out of so that it could be given to the Jews to assist them with rebuilding the temple? Time, his own royal treasury. Question 6. Mordecai was a Jew living in Persia. Why did Mordecai raise his much younger cousin Hadassah like she was his own daughter? Time, Hadassah's parents had died. Number 7. Hadassah was her Hebrew name. What name did she go by in Persia? Time, Esther. Number 8. King Ahasuerus held a banquet for all his nobles and officials. On the 7th day of the banquet, the king ordered for Queen Vashti to come. How did Queen Vashti respond to the king's order? Time, she refused to come. Question 9. Why did Esther not reveal that she was a Jew? Time, because Mordecai forbid her. He told her not to tell anyone. And last question, question 10. What royal position did Esther receive? Time, queen. Okay, how many did you get right? Now multiply that by 10 and that's your score. Now I have 2 assignments for you. I want you to go read Esther chapters 1 and 2. Then go tell someone what you learned today. Come back for our next video in our Teach Me the Bible Story series. See you next time.